Hi everyone, welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige Fullman. This week, we are staying local. We are sticking to Chicago and talking to a photojournalist and protest photographer. We are going to be talking to Adriano Kalin. I came across Adriano because somebody that I was following had reposted some of his work, and he's been deeply, deeply intertwined in the Broadview protests, which, for those that are outside of Illinois, that would be the facility that people have been protesting out, that all those crazy, insane videos are coming out of. And I was immediately taken by his photographs. Like, I don't really have a way to describe it except that his photos made me feel emotions, and a deep range of them, of respect and sadness and despair and also hope. And so I reached out to him, and he graciously accepted my invitation, which I am very happy for because I think his story deserves to be told. And when I spoke to him, I do a short little intro call with every guest that I have on here just to make sure that everything's fine and normal. But on my intro call with him, I discovered just how deep these things go for Adriano. And I just felt so compelled then that he needed to tell a story, and he had so much to say beyond the photographs that he posts on Instagram. But first, a short little bio on Adriano. Adriano is a documentary photographer specializing in social justice. He draws on his experience as an Afro-Indigenous Brazilian adoptee with dual citizenship to examine race, identity, and oppression within the United States. Through his work, Adriano documents the lives of the most marginalized, bringing his personal experience of being targeted by systemic violence with the stories of the people and places he photographs. Building lasting and genuine relationships with the communities he documents is inherent to Adriano's practice. His images are a reflection of his own search for identity and belonging as much as they are representative of the people and narratives he seeks to uplift. Adriano's current work is dedicated to documenting the widespread and ongoing impacts of ICE presence in Chicago under the command of the Trump administration. His photographs center on citywide resistance, actions taking place outside the ICE detention facility in Broadview, Illinois, and protests throughout the Chicagoland area and nationwide. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Adriano. Adriano, thank you so much for coming on. It is great to have you.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, so I found you on Instagram, scrolling through my feed on a lovely day, and you've posted a lot of pictures that have gone semi-viral about protests in and around the city of Chicago. You've been at these protests for months at this point, especially around the Broadview ICE facility, which has gotten kind of notorious in the news.
Yeah.
What first pulled you into going to these recent protests and going consistently?
That's a good question. I mean, I would first say that I started off doing social justice photography. So social justice photography is very much a labyrinth of a lot of these topics that we're talking about with mass migration, with the horrific policies this administration is instilling onto the migrant community. So I'm going to be very blunt. I'm a naturalized citizen. I'm an immigrant. This literally affects me the second I walk outside my door,
Right.
to the point where the second I type anything online, whether it's something that's going to be censored, whether ICE is going to be, bashing my door through or not. So I didn't feel like I had a choice to be silent in this. But realistically, I literally started out doing street photography. So street photography is pretty much going on the street. You're very much kind of like a fly on a wall, if you will. You don't really impede on the environment. You strictly just document it. And I think that's super important. But I think it's even more important that people specifically who are part of this marginalized community is documenting this. So a lot of people aren't aware of with like photojournalism is that majority of photojournalists are white men. To no fault of their own, that is just the demographic. So roughly 5 to 10% of people are LGBTQ, part of marginalized communities, people of color, and women. So you have this like white supremacy narrative that this administration is pulling, and then you tend to have white photographers telling the story. So it's this kind of like loop. And I felt like I really needed to do something. And I always told myself that if, something like this were to happen, I would do something about it. And I think it's really easy to say, oh, yeah, if the civil rights was happening in 1965, I'd be standing up there with everyone. It's really easy to say that when nothing is happening. When
Right.
push comes to shove, you're getting tear gassed, it puts your safety at risk. You really kind of find that there are a lot of people standing up with you. So that's why I ended up doing it.
Have you felt like you've obviously done this for a long time, like gone out and photographed protests? Have you feel have you changed anything about the way you approach your photography with this set of protests that seems like it's a little bit more aggressive than in years past?
Yeah, I mean, first one, safety. I technically didn't have any safety protocols, if you will. I mean, I had a safety protocol with my wife of like, checking in with her every hour to make sure, I'm not, dead on the street, something like that happens. But um realistically, um, it's been kind of a thing where throughout this whole thing, things are evolving, whether it's at Broadview, whether it's in Chicago, whether it's Portland, LA, New York, pick any metropolitan area. I think we kind of get this type of photography of, that New York Times, LA Times style, very colorful, very, this is, some harsh photos to look out. I try to look at it a little bit differently. As you probably noticed, a lot of my work is black and white. So I tend to really put like an artistic muse onto my photos, because I think we get an onslaught of so much depressing shit all the time. So I wanted to make it so the fact that these are something, all right, I've never seen before. These are something that are different, because especially with the Instagram or TikTok or Twitter, or whatever you want to say, these algorithms that are constantly being pushed, there are 100 photographers just like me doing the exact same thing. How are you going to separate yourself from them? How are you going to show the empathy of, what's going on? But I have to say, going to art school really helped. Knowing your camera inside and out. So the fact that you're not panicking when there's rubber bullets or there's tear gas getting thrown at you, you need to know that camera like it's like driving stick. If you mess up,
Right.
you're not going to get the photograph. You're going to, I wish I could have, shoulda. But yeah, it's just been one of those things that just throughout this whole journey, I'm still learning. I think I'll always try to be an educator of photography, but I'll also try to be an educator and also a learner of photography. So I'm by no means perfect. I'm still learning. There's certainly things I can improve on. But I like to have my photos look like they just weren't, I just pressed the shutter button and I just hoped. They're very much, I am really studying what's around me. I'm trying not to panic, and I'm hoping that comes across the photos, that it doesn't look like, I'm just pressing the shutter button and just hoping that, the right moment addresses itself.
Right. Now that you're like explaining that, like I can totally see that as I'm like thinking back to looking through your gallery on your website. Like I think I told you in my initial message to you, when I saw your photography, I was immediately just taken by it. Like the black and white style choice, you can just tell that there is a lot of thought and care put into it, even in those chaotic moments that like typically there's not thought and care put into stuff like that because there's so much other stuff going on around you.
Sure. Yeah. And it's one of those things, like black and white really makes you rely strictly on the composition, where color photography, you have certain elements of capitalism being thrown in there, no fault to anyone else's. But you might see a logo of a Pepsi or a Coke or the McDonald's art three arches. And I always want to make sure that the photographs I'm taking, I'm strictly relying on shadows, highlights, and composition, which can be really tricky. And also through my camera, I'm always looking at everything in black and white.
Interesting. Okay. So when you are shooting at a protest, what do you think you're really chasing when you're taking photos there? Are you chasing the moment, the emotion, or more just the broader story?
I mean, I would say all three, but for me personally, I am chasing making sure that people's voices who are being censored, who are being silenced, are able to say what they need to say. There's this whole thing of like, in protest photography, do you redact people's faces? Do you blur things out? And for my personal opinion, I don't think you should. People are there for a reason. People are there to document and show the history of what is happening. And the second you start, altering the image, you are altering history. Um, and the way I look at it, you know, if there's a child in the photograph, for 90% of the time, I will go up to the parent and say, "Hey, do you mind?" Usually I'll take the photo and then I'll kind of use like lip sync, and I'll be like, "Thank you." And they kind of give me like a yes, don't. But honestly, it's all about reading body language. Um, and it's the one thing that I really try to show in my photographs is even though a photograph is silent, I try to be able to amplify, like, there's movement, there are things happening. It's not just this, picture that you just take. And I think more importantly, I think photography as a medium, whether it's social justice, whether it's protest, whatever it may be, it gives us the permission to look. It gives us the permission to kind of fight our own ignorance. Or even with videography, which I love, which is a great medium, I find that for me, especially having a traumatic brain injury, it's almost too much data being thrown at me at once. Where a photograph, I'm like able to look like at this print, for example, study the lines, study, the contrast, study the highlights, study the shadows. What is a photographer trying to tell me? So that's the way I look at it. And I think this is like a great example. Like this photograph right here was at one of the first protests after October 7th. And obviously there's a child, there's the mother, you can't see who they are. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter that you don't see who they are. It's the fact that they were there, they're being seen, they want their voices heard. And sometimes not even showing their faces. If you're doing the composition, that it's a beautiful moment of, a mother, showing her daughter, like, we're not alone. And there's a whole
Yeah.
community out there for us.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean when I say I'm just so taken by your photos. Because again, I could tell that just like by when you popped up on my screen and I saw that in the background, I was like, oh, I like that one. Like, I'm just drawn to the way you compose your photos. But
Thank you.
going back broader to just the Broadview demonstrations on the whole, they have rippled way beyond the city of Chicago and even the state of Illinois, and they're reaching communities that don't often show up in the same spaces. I don't know if you saw some of those Don Lemon videos when he was down there, but it is bringing out people of every walk of life possible.
Mhm.
What does that reveal to you about where the Chicago area and Illinois is politically and emotionally right now? And, using your experiences on the ground too.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I'm a bit confused of what the where we are politically, because, like, for example, JB Pritzker, our governor of Illinois, I think he's saying all the right things of, ICE shouldn't be harassing his constituents, his neighbors, make sure that you document, et cetera, et cetera. But on the ground, specifically at Broadview, I'm seeing something else. I'm seeing ISP, which is the Illinois State Police, pretty much orchestrate a vacuum of silence, if you will, around the facility. So let's talk, and this is relevant to this, but in the past 2 months, roughly, people were able to protest literally outside the gate on the actual driveway of the facility, which is 1930 Beach Street, to the point where then they
Okay,
started.
everybody write that down so then you can go there.
but then they implemented the illegal gate and annexed a public road, which they had no permission from the elected officials in that district, to the point where they have pushed people so far back that even though you're protesting, they can't hear shit. And part of my language, they literally cannot hear you. So there are now, what do they call them? Freedom of speech zones, where they're pretty much barriers on the left and the right-hand side of the road, where you can speak the second you jump over that barrier to cross the street or be in the street by accident, fall, whatever it may be. You'll either get arrested, detained, or you'll get hit with billy clubs. And so a lot of people aren't aware that there is the Beach Street, which is the main entrance, and then there's an alternate entrance, which is Harvard Street. Harvard Street is like a, I don't know, 10-12 minute walk, kind of like around the block off of 25th Street. In Harvard Street was where you saw a lot of people get tear gassed, shot at during the day, especially. It was very much kind of like an open alleyway where truck drivers, delivery drivers could kind of move through. That is no longer, you can't even protest there. Your First Amendment rights do not exist there. If you try to protest, you will be arrested, you'll be detained. So there has been a complete escalation of, what's going on. And I know our governor was like, hey, make sure you document, make sure you show what's happening, which I think is a great message. However, even being a photographer that I am now, I've been doing this for now 10 years or so. It took me years to be able to make a clear composition, especially under stress, especially when there's a gun pointing at you. I think it's really reckless, if you will, what the governor is saying, especially the fact that he didn't offer any legal services for the community. Well, most people are within a $500 emergency fund, if that, in this, especially the socioeconomic time that we're in. So when you have the governor saying, hey, put yourself in harm's way to document what's going on, and then being like, hey, but if you're arrested, if you're detained, hey, you're SOL. Hopefully the National Lawyers Guild might be able to help you. Maybe there are other legal routes you can go. But the fact that the governor wasn't like, hey, the Attorney General and I are creating some sort of plan. So the fact that when you're documenting on our behalf, there's something. So that's been something that's been kind of unsettling. On the other note, which has been amazing, is that out of the 77 different neighborhoods in Chicago, I would say half have probably been hit by ICE by now. There has been a very big sense of community, sense of belonging. People, I made this reference in one of my Substacks that it feels like 2016 Pokemon Go, of like where people walked around during like the neighborhood of like playing in, Pokemon, trying to catch the Pokemon.
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh, I need my whistle. So the fact that, if my neighbor gets detained,
Right.
I'm around. So like even in my neighborhood in Rogers Park, I've probably met well over 150 neighbors so far. In 2025, with the technology that we're in, all our heads are down at our iPhones. That's unheard of. So there is some hope that is coming out of it, and very much from a grassroots standpoint.
Right. Well, I think Chicago has just shown that we are not a city to, take this line down. Like, this is not something that people are just going to sit there and go, oh, well, I guess that's just life now. Like, that's what I'm seeing. Like, that gives me hope. But what you said about Jamie Pritzker, I 100% agree. Love that guy. I guess he's my favorite billionaire, but he is talking the talk and not walking the walk. I would agree with that.
And especially
and
like
I
did my research just to make sure I wasn't, again, talking out of my other side of my mouth, is that the current director of the Illinois State Police was appointed by Pritzker. So the command is Pritzker as the governor, state police. He completely can say, hey, don't or do this. And another thing that I've had feedback from people out of the state who have said, I don't agree with protesters being in the street, et cetera, et cetera. I will say I would rather be tear gassed, shot at with rubber bullets, potentially permanently harmed, if that made it so the fact that my neighbors were safe. Because right now, what is happening, and I cannot stress this enough, is that it's an assembly line going from the ICE processing facility to the ICE vehicles into the neighborhood without having to deal with any protesters, without having to deal with any sense of monitoring. A lot of the rapid response teams now have no idea what the license plates are because they can't take photographs because they're coming out of an entrance that no one could be around. It's super problematic. But this is
you can't even see like the vehicles leaving.
You can technically see what leaves and enters, but the second you're near that entrance, they're like, you need to leave. You can't be here. And literally, there's a sign that says only residents are allowed to be on the sidewalk. So if you're not a resident of, like, I cannot stress of how much the Illinois State Police, Cook Sheriff's Police, Broadview, and then there's another neighborhood who are pretty much, they may not be doing what ICE is doing, but they are absolutely
Right.
making it so the fact that, hey, not our problem, it's someone else's problem.
Okay, that's okay. A couple weeks ago, I read about how the ACLU sued the city of Broadview for First Amendment infringements, and I didn't really understand it at first. I was like, First Amendment infringements, and I didn't really look into it, but that explains everything
Yeah.
about that lawsuit. So
Yeah.
thank you for that.
You're okay. It's okay.
So let's move on to more broader storytelling through photography. Protest photography is always a little bit art and also a little bit evidence should justice prevail. How do you balance creating something beautiful but also documenting something true that could potentially be shown in court, for lack of a better scenario?
That's a good question. I'm still wrapping my head around what my place is in all this. Granted, again, I said earlier that, I am a person directly affected because of this right here. But it's one of those things that my professors at the Art Institute of Chicago, which did such a good job training me, they taught me the fact that the historical context of the photograph is sometimes even more important than the composition itself. And what that means in kind of a broader term is the fact that just because we're in 2025, you are in discussion with other protest photographers over the past 100 years, 150 years. Each decision you make as a photographer, whether it's creating a black and white narrative, color narrative, if you're doing a diptych, whatever and it doesn't even need to be photography as a medium. It could be painting, it could be literature, it could be sketching, whatever. Just knowing the fact that I'm in conversation with all these other people who have paved the way and made progress for some of the civil rights that I have now. But of course, do I hope that I get that one perfect photo that is absolutely timeless and that is something that is going to speak, 1,000 words just because of this photograph, of course. But yeah, I'm still dealing with what happens with the importance of my photograph. And I guess here's an example. I was just recently interviewed by the Human Rights Watch, which is never a good sign when your country is interviewed by the Human Rights Watch. Just saying
Oh
like
my
how
God.
dystopian our country has become. But yeah, I was interviewed
Actually,
by
you know what?
them.
You're right, because if the Human Rights Watch emailed me, I'd literally be like, get out. Like, no.
Like if you
Oh my
told
God.
me even like a decade ago of where we are now, and I may be aging myself here, but I remember Bush's presidency extremely well, with the Iraq War, Afghanistan War, 9/11, et cetera. And I remember how, in my personal opinion, his presidency was super problematic. His presidency, like Trump has made his presidency seem like,
Child's
like,
play.
yeah,
It's child's play.
yeah. And it just, and I'm like, and I'm sure everyone else who is reading or seeing this or listening to this podcast is like doom scrolling, just waking up. Oh God, what am I going to wake up to next? But I think one thing I've been really toying about with this moment with protest photography is I'm trying to balance the heaviness of what is going on and also showing some of the beauty that is happening as well. Because I
Right.
think it is, I don't want to be a photographer who's strictly known for just like this dystopian imagery, whether it may be powerful, whether it may be important. I think there is certainly different narratives. But yeah, that's something that I've been, considering.
Don't worry, I feel you. So throughout history, and especially during the Vietnam War, photography completely changed how people perceived events and how they perceived power. Do you think we're seeing a new kind of censorship now, whether through algorithms or limited access to things or the way that images are circulated?
Oh yeah, I mean 100%. I will say like the Vietnam War was like the last war that at least the United States have had that has been so well documented, not strictly just from like a photo aspect, but journalism, from the news. And immediately after that, the Pentagon was like, okay, we're losing the will of the people. We need to censor this. And when you think about like the war that happened in the early 2000s after 9/11, think about it. Can you remember any like war photography? I can't.
No.
And the biggest thing I remember is waking up, I was in 8th grade, maybe 10th grade at the time, and seeing night vision videos. And it's very easy to dehumanize a population when you don't see them. When it's, I'm over here, they're over there, they're that religion, I'm this religion, I'm this skin color, they're that skin color, I'm this sex, they're this sex. There's ways to really dehumanize it. And with everything, regarding censorship, there's two fronts that are being really challenged right now. Number one, the captions, the actual things that we're actually seeing online, whether it's on Meta's platform, Twitter, you name it. I don't know if you remember that during some of the protests, specifically Palestine, a lot of people were using like music festivals as a way to trick, as a way to
and they're
trick,
still doing that. They're still doing that. Yeah.
So we are always having to like find new ways to find, people to see our work. And I can't, and like, especially even with the US TikTok being purchased by Oracle, that's a new thing of, the United States we're kind of creating our own firewall, our own bubble where our own media is not exiting the country. Also, other international news is not entering the country. So it's been definitely a big challenge. And I think another thing that's really been challenging is that each time I'm uploading a photograph, a reel, a video, whatever it may be, in the back of my head, and I'm sure a lot of people are feeling this, is this going to make me on the terrorist watch list? And this shouldn't.
You and me both, baby. Yep.
Yep. And this shouldn't be a thing that we should have to contemplate just doing the things that we learned in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, treat people with respect, hear other people's views, making sure that people, feel that they're being heard, making sure that our civil rights are not being impacted, constitutional rights. I'm well aware that the stuff that I am putting out there to the void, whether it's mass media, whether it's a gallery, that the next day ICE or the FBI or choose any abbreviation of three letters could be at my door. But I find that if I don't say something, if I don't speak up, that expensive school tuition that my parents fortunately paid for me, what was the point? Like, what is the point of having privilege and then only using it to benefit yourself?
Right.
And the honest truth is, the only difference between me and someone else who's undocumented is literally a paper that says naturalization. That's it. And majority of us in this country, whether you're white, black, brown, have some sort of immigration, whether it was forced through slavery or whether it was trying to find a better life, whether it was to escape religious persecution in Europe, whatever it may be. We are very much all in the same, bubble, but through racism, it's been able to be like, I want these benefits for myself. Fuck these other people. And it can't be any more clearly. And that's one of the things that, like, even with the rapid response things of like seeing specifically white people come out is so heartwarming, because it's been so, and I feel like I can speak for a lot of other people of color, that there has been so much white silence. And seeing people who are like, obviously the people who are going to protest, who are doing rapid response, they're not getting paid. They're doing it to help their neighbor. They're doing it to benefit their community. But yeah, that's where I think that, in full circle, it's a challenge, and I don't have the right answers. I'm just a photographer, but I think that it's really important to document this time, especially in the world of AI, which I feel like even 5 years ago, we weren't having this discussion of artificial intelligence, of like what's real, what's not. I think it's even that much more important to not alter the photograph. I mean, you can alter it, in my personal opinion, in the sense of like, you can bring up the highlights, the shadows, maybe make it, from like a Lightroom, but like, I don't personally believe in, especially with protest photography, to be like, oh man, that elbow's in the photograph, I gotta erase it, like, crop it out.
Yeah.
But so that's the way I look at it.
Yeah. Well, one thing, and then I want to move to AI, but I agree. It has been very heartwarming in a way to see the old white ladies like coming out of their houses and, you know, especially ones that were too young for the civil rights protests or the ones that were there during the civil rights protests and saying like, this is not like this is not what I was raised on. And it
Yeah.
always just warms my heart to see the old white ladies.
Yeah, and like shout out to my parents. Like I'm adopted. I was born in Brazil. My parents are white from New York City. They're pretty as white as you can get, but they have used their privilege of the way they benefited from white supremacy indirectly or directly to give me a better life. To make sure I got a fantastic education. Even though personally for me, I never graduated high school. A lot of people aren't aware of that. I ended up going to 10th grade. And the whole thing of being adopted really messed with my head. I ended up getting my associate's degree, ended up going back to school after a car accident. And my parents have done so much to instill into me that make the world a better place. My mom, when I was 18, I didn't want to vote. I'm sure a lot of 18-year-olds can agree with this of like, oh, I want to lay in bed. I don't want to, and she was like, no, you need to vote. Like, you need to vote. And I'm like, fine. What do I need to vote for? Tell me the list.
Right.
And she was like, no, you need to look it up. And my mom, who is with the League of Women Voters, she just really, I mean, she's 75 now and just every day is helping marginalized communities, and her reflection on in the growth that she's had on my learning. I think a lot of people think of like our photography, our decisions that we make, that we just take the press the shutter button and that's what we do. We walk away, upload the photograph, and hopefully it goes viral. There is so many people who have made impacts on my life. My mom, my dad, my wife, they have really instilled in me set of ideals that help those who can't speak for themselves.
Right. I personally come from a long line of women that don't shut the hell up when they're supposed to, so I guess this outlet makes a whole lot of sense for me. But moving back towards the AI conversation, as you mentioned, we're in this weird period where lots of people are using AI generated photos, which can sometimes go viral a lot faster than real authentic photos. How does that change your sense of responsibility as a photographer or even as a witness?
I would say there's two. When AI first hit we kind of started seeing it. I don't know do you remember that video of Will Smith eating spaghetti?
Yes.
It's like he had like 10 fingers. It was like, I was like, Jesus, how can people not, figure this AI stuff out? And then I remember, this is one of the big scary things. I don't know if you remember growing up, early 2000s, 90s, of parents being like, don't trust what you see on the internet. Like, right.
Mm-hmm.
That was like kind of a thing that we hear. Now AI is getting to the point where even I'm like, even as a trained photographer, I'm struggling to look at a photograph and be like, is this real? Is this not? But I will say there are things that are being done in the photography space specifically that are ways to challenge AI. Leica, which is a really famous photography brand in Europe, they make really high-end cameras. They ended up teaming up with, I believe, don't quote me on this, it was either New York Times or LA Times, to pretty much put encrypted data inside the metadata. So each time you take a photograph, there's metadata that you can't see, I can't see, but our computers can. It kind of says like the time of date, the geolocation that we took the photograph, etc. There was this big whole thing of like, a lot of manufacturers don't have any safety guards of AI. So Leica ended up creating software for their cameras. It's only on a couple cameras, and of course it's the more expensive caliber ones, that there is encrypted data so that when you take a photo and you send it to New York Times, LA Times, Chicago Tribune, whoever it may be, they can see that it was never tampered with. So there are little things that are being instilled in the photography space. Of course, in my personal opinion, I think this kind of should be like the 3-point seatbelt. It's what Volvo discovered and created, and I think it was I think it was the 80s, but they realized it was going to save lives. So they're like, hey, we'll give it to every manufacturer. And that's why when you buy a Nissan, a Subaru, whatever it may be, you have, the 3-point seatbelt and saves countless
Right.
lives. I think that to way to combat this AI conglomerate, if you will, that I hope that they open up that software to other companies, because it's something that is really troublesome. And there's been evidence of photojournalists, unfortunately, who have used altered images, and it's happened. So
I just don't think the world needs more, like, the stuff we're seeing in the news right now is already bad enough. I think we don't need AI
yeah.
to make it worse.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. I think that with AI, I think every technology, you kind of get this, like this, it's new, this peak interest, then it kind of hits that peak, and then people are like, all right, I'm sick of it. I don't even want to hear anything that has AI. And I think you are starting to slowly see that pushback,
Yeah.
that there are people being like, listen, Meta, I will pay a subscription fee if I don't see AI, gibberish
Right.
on my feed. So I think that
Right.
we are going to be seeing that. And I think that is going to be making a really strong statement of photography in general, that people are going to be wanting to crave, whether it's arts and crafts, whether it's drawing, painting, that human interaction is going to become even more valuable.
Right. So when people are viewing real, genuine images and not AI images, what do you think people misunderstand the most about protests when they're only seeing them through the lens of the news or social media?
I think, and I guess I'm part of I'm part of the problem here a little bit, but I think
I was
that
going to say I was part of the problem. So let me you tell me why you're part of the problem, and then I can tell you why I'm part of the problem.
Okay. I mean, your camera only has a certain resolution, a certain camera ratio. Every photograph I'm taking, I'm neglecting 90% of the information around me. I mean, it's just it's the physical limitation of the art form. Um, I'm being, I'm using my judgment, but I'm also being a bit predatory in that sense, where I am choosing, all right, this person walks by, I'm not going to take the photograph. Ooh, this looks interesting. Take that photograph. But I just neglected their story. And that is problematic. And of course, I can't, go home with like 100,000 photographs as much as I'd love to. But there's whatever I'm picking to photograph, I'm also neglecting a truth. And whatever I'm showing, I'm obviously neglecting a different perspective. Whether my perspective is wrong, whether my intentions might be good, there might be something behind me that is completely altering what I'm seeing in front of me, and I'm just not aware of it. And like, there's a really, really famous, not when I even say famous, but there's a famous clip on YouTube where a news journalist, like, from like a video camera, got to the scene too late. So they had LED lights blinking red and blue to make it look like it was a police like car in front of them. So it looked like a more authentic. So
Oh,
I, so it just, I'm, like, even as a photographer, I'm very skeptical of what I'm witnessing. There's a really famous photograph from James Spider Martin, March 7th, 1965, during the Bloody Sunday Civil Rights March at the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. It's a really, if you Google it, it'll come up. But you pretty much have, it's so eerie of what is happening today. You have state troopers or local police to the left, and then you have protesters to the right, like civil rights activist John Lewis, who unfortunately passed away. And there's just this gap of space. You have no idea what is happening behind them. You have no idea what is happening behind the photographer. You have no idea what is happening more in the foreground, just because the fact that, you can only see so much. So as much as our intentions as photographers are to show what is happening, I'm going to be honest, I certainly have my biases. My biases absolutely 100% come through my photography. And if I said otherwise, I'm full of shit. It comes through everyone's photography. And whether we plan to or not, it is what our eyes capture. It is, like, for example, if there was, like a hate crime in front of me, I'm probably going to photograph that a little bit different than someone who is advocating for that hate crime, right? So I
Understandably
think
so.
understandably so. So it's and I've also dealt with this of like, when do I put the camera down and when do I help? And that is something I don't have an answer to yet. And that is something that I was dealing with specifically. I don't remember the day, but it was in early October where that horrific incident happened where everyone was getting tear gas at night. It was a Friday night. And there was this tear gas canister that, for whatever reason, combusted into like a fireball. And this guy was
Great.
coughing next. Yeah, the guy was coughing next to me, and I'm like over here taking like the photo while taking my gas mask off because he couldn't hear me otherwise, and be like, "Dude, are you okay?" And of course, I was like, "Well, if I ask him if he's okay, my brain, my eyes are not, looking through the composition of like the best photograph I can probably take." But at that decision, I made, human being or the photograph. For me, it was more important for the human being. So,
Right.
But I think that comes, with the whole safety thing of like JB Pritzker and what he was saying about, document. It's to the point where I have my camera lens through my eyes. Like, I don't even have to look at my camera. I don't have to look through the viewfinder anymore. I like whatever I see will come through compositionally. But obviously when, you have people crying next to you, coughing, screaming, cursing,
Right.
you have, and I'm personally someone who suffers from hyperacusis, which is pretty much hypersensitivity to loud sounds that I'm not prepared for. Probably not the best environment for me sometimes, but I try to do my best to, help and, do what I can. But yeah, I think that that's a thing of like our narrative and our storytelling. Photography has always been a visual storytelling
Right.
activity. And I try to be as authentic as I can. But I think that to be a really good photographer, and I know I made comments about this earlier about historical context is really important. I think it's just important to pick up a book and read. You will become so much better photographer if you read about whether it's the landscape, the geography, the historical context, whether it's the social issues, whatever it may be. Your academic text is just as important, if not more important, before you ever take the picture, because it will inform you of the decisions you're making.
Right. Well, I was going to say I was the problem because I am viewing these Broadview protests from the lens of news and social media. Like my sources are you, the other people on the ground, and that is, I don't want to use the word bias. It's not necessarily
Sure.
a biased view, but all I'm getting is the information that's accessible to me. Like, I'm not on the ground and able to experience it. You've told me about 10 things today that I would have been none the wiser to
Sure.
unless we had had this conversation. Like, that's scary that's the filtered lens that I'm viewing the situation through.
Yeah, and it's also like really super problematic. I know we were talking about this of like how your work kind of gets out into the ether, if you will. Like Instagram, for example, if your video is under 3 minutes, I mean, I'm sure they could probably change this decision next week because it seems like every week it's new logistics on it on Instagram of what goes viral, what doesn't. But at the moment, if your video is under 3 minutes, it can be pushed out to non-followers. If it's longer than 3 minutes, it's 3 minutes and 1 second, which is not a lot of time to be able to disclose facts, information, all these things. So the fact that you're
Right.
hitting so it's like you have to almost pick and choose what you're divulging to your audience, which is super problematic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as you just kind of spoke about, protests can be emotional, unpredictable, chaotic. How do you stay grounded enough to keep your eye behind the camera?
Okay, here's the honest truth. I think I've went through like the 7 stages of grief on on all this. The
Okay.
first step is like pretty much, you're overwhelmed, you're scared. And I'm sure I'm not going in the right order, so I apologize. But I went through, I'm scared, I'm fearful. There was a time, if you look back at my photos, there was like a month where I'm really quiet. And it is my brain grappling of what is happening. I'm in PTSD therapy, or at least I was. to really combat of what is happening. And even through PTSD therapy, I kind of felt like I was not being gaslit, but it was like, come on, man, I don't think this is going to happen. It's okay. And lo and behold, we're like, look where we are now in what is it, October?
I think
it's not
everybody was doing some gaslighting. Like for a long time, I was like, maybe this podcast is stupid. Like his first administration really was like a big nothing burger. Like maybe this is just going to be nothing. Thank God I started it because I got lots of material to talk about.
Exactly. And honestly, it drove me nuts, like in MSNBC specifically, when they were like, oh, it's a constitutional crisis. And I'm like, and they were like so skeptical of using that phrase. I'm like, are you fucking out of your mind? I mean, people are getting like detained for the like nothing, and infringement and lawsuits, and I digress. But for me, being grounded with all this, I went through being scared, just like everyone else who is listening to this or viewing this. I've been there. I've hit the point of I just don't give a fuck anymore. Granted, I still want to be here for my wife. Like, I'm not saying, I'm not going to do anything, but I've pretty much hit the point of I don't give a fuck, because I like, if they're going to come for me, they're going to come for me no matter what. If I'm silent, if I'm loud, if it's just a matter of when.
Right. Well, that's what, like, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not on the ground at protests with tear gas every day, but like there was a moment where, and I still am a little bit scared to leave the country on the off chance that like somehow I've ended up on a watch list due to what I post on social media, whatever. But I've always kind of been like, I can't care that much, because if I go down, at least I went down swinging. At least I went down being loud and vocal about what I believe in. Like, if that's what gets me taken down, I'm glad that it is.
Yeah, there's a I speak to my wife about this. This is the super optimistic way of looking at this. Is I've gotten to the point where I'm recognized on the street in Chicago, which is a blessing and, potentially can be a curse for safety issues, obviously. A lot of people have came up to me and been like, thank you for the work you're doing. It's super important to the community, et cetera, which has been phenomenal. And I'm greatly appreciative for each and every one of the people who have came up to me. And if you do see me in the street, come up, say hi. I'm very approachable, at least I think. But on the other end of the spectrum, like, oh shit, ICE knows who I am. Like, if 11,000 people know who I am in Chicago, ICE certainly has an idea of who I am. But then on the other end of the spectrum, and this is what I tell myself, is the fact that if I am abducted, and I choose that word very carefully, it's not getting arrested, it's not getting detained. You have no due process. You are being abducted. You're being kidnapped. You are being snatched. That if that does happen, I built a big enough bubble, if you will, that people hopefully would say something and feel like, where the fuck is he? Like, where on the other end of the spectrum, when I started doing my social justice photography, a lot of people didn't know exactly who I was, and no fault to anyone else's, just of course the algorithm. I'd get like 20 likes on a photo and and cry about it just like everyone else. And but now it's to the point where I've told my wife, I'm like, listen, if something happens to me, use my resources that I have and contact people. I'm also very, 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 very fortunate that my cousin is a civil rights attorney in Chicago. So he has jurisdiction in where I'm specifically staying, and he specifically deals with police brutality, which unfortunately we have a plethora of. So it's
he's just raking it in, and unfortunately it's not under the best of circumstances.
Exactly. So I have, and I cannot explain how privileged I am, but also how oppressed I am at the same time. I'm oppressed by my skin color, but I'm very privileged of the family who adopted me and the resources that came with it. So if I had that privilege and I was like, you know what, hey man, it doesn't involve me, it's not my problem, I don't think that's acceptable. Because eventually, if it's not immigrants now, it could be LGBTQ tomorrow, it could be indigenous people next, it could be, Pol Pot, for example, was someone who victimized and killed people who had reading glasses. Like, people, there are dictators. If you literally let a dictator just keep going through the logistics of, the bullshit that we're seeing, it will never stop. But what I am very grateful of seeing, whether it's through my camera or seeing through the neighborhood, like the rapid response, for example, in Rogers Park was implemented in 2017. I had no idea. I moved to Rogers Park 8 months ago, so I'm still relatively new to the neighborhood after living in Pilsen. And it's, that's, yeah.
All right. Well, your website, and it's, again, very clear in your photography, your website says you focus a lot on empathy. What does that mean to you in moments of confusion, fear, grief that are so often photographed at protests?
Here's a great example. Voyeurism. I think everyone wants to take that one photograph that speaks so much volume. And a great example is National Geographic, who took that, in my personal opinion, horrendous photograph of the Black child who had a vulture in the background. And it was just like, that photograph has harmed Africa, has harmed most countries who are not white and privileged, as the stereotype of, poverty stricken, etc. So where I'm going with this, I've been a photographer, and when it comes to empathy, I don't want to just take a photo and walk away. There's enough of that. There is an aspect of, like, the second you ask for consent, you are technically, it's kind of like, if I tell you right now, just do me a favor, act normal, you're gonna be like, I don't know what that means. like I'm just like
right.
So when you take that initial shot, a lot of photographers there's a kind of this theory: take the photograph first, ask for permission later, because the second you're like, hey, do you mind if I take your photograph? And then, can you just do what you're doing? It's kind of like weird. It's kind of, it's voyeuristic.
Right.
I think the place you are really makes a difference, whether it's like, I was talked about this with a lot of my photographer friends who are females, and this is a great example. If you ever look at nighttime photography, you'll notice a lot of it is by men. There's a reason. Men feel safer walking the streets at night, and for sexual harassment, with a plethora of violence, unfortunately. On the other hand, if you think about, like, a lot of, like, beautiful children photos of, like, at the parks, playing, swimming, a lot of them are by women, and there's a reason. I'd be a peeping Tom. I mean, seriously, there's a time and a place where the camera is appropriate.
If I saw a woman with a camera taking a picture of my kid, I'd be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
If it was a man, I'd be a little bit like,
what are you doing? What are you doing?
What are you going to do with that?
Exactly.
Unfortunately, my biases are showing, but, like, I get that.
No, but those biases are there for a reason. I mean, we are at our very nature to be defensive, and especially living in a big city. And it's, even for me right now, I used to have the liberty to walk around with noise canceling headphones, listen to my music. Now I can't, because I have to listen for fucking whistles. So it's the photograph, I try to balance a version of a photograph where I'm not getting involved. I'm just letting the moment progress naturally. But there are also times when I like to do portraits, and obviously, if you do a portrait, you need consent. You need them to look at you. And then there's times when I am just sitting at a bench, or sitting at or even standing somewhere, and I just wait. Sometimes the lighting is perfect, and you're like, eventually the right moment will come, and you could be waiting there for like 5 minutes. You could be waiting there for 45 minutes. But I've never been. There's a very famous photographer who a lot of street photographers idolize. His name's Bruce Gilden. He did a lot of work in New York City, but he was very much a photographer who would, like, when I mean, like, walk up to you, have a flash in the hand, burst the flash in your face, and then take the photograph and keep moving. It's a form.
I would have called the police. I hope you know that. I literally would have called the police.
So, and even today, there's a lot of photographers who do that, but I don't like doing that. I hope, in one of my goals as a photographer, I hope that you see that I'm not trying to objectify the community. And I think that even in what I mentioned before, when it comes to empathy, read about the community that you're documenting. Don't go in there and being like, hey, you know, I have this narrative. I want to say this. I think this should do this. Like, for example, for my BFA thesis, I wrote this book. Great book, by the way.
Oh,
Excellent
the new
book.
Jim Crow.
Yeah.
God love her.
Yeah. Michelle Alexander, I cannot speak highly enough about this, but like obviously you see all my tabs, but
She's
this
well
was
loved, obviously.
she is. But like this was a book I did for my BFA thesis, and I really wanted to understand specifically in Chicago why we keep hearing that Chicago is a segregated city. It is something that you hear, oh, Chicago is one of the most segregated cities. Why? What is the answer? I want to know the answer. And I understand that, you know, there's the mass migration. I started reading about certain books. There's like a really good book. I think you and I spoke about this, about Red Line.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
else. Yeah. Red Line, which was a memoir about a white woman who originally lived in West Garfield Park in the
Mm-hmm.
1960s. And whether you may not be a book lover, totally cool. I respect that. I hated reading books when I was younger.
Yeah,
I
that's an
also
adult hobby that I've picked up as well.
it is. So I mean, even reading documentaries, it's specifically in Chicago. There's the Black History Museum, the DuSable Black History Museum, right in the South Side near Hyde Park, is fantastic. At the time that I was there, they had original prints from John Tweedle, which was one of the photographers who followed Martin Luther King around. Some of the greatest photographs I've ever seen, and to be able to get the access to Martin Luther King. So I think that when people do their research and people take their time, and I think that especially in a lot of people have asked, and this is a question I get asked a lot in general, do I work with a publisher? Who do I work for? I work for myself. I self-publish. I obviously use Substack, Instagram, you know, social media, but I don't want to work for a big publishing house. I think there are certain
Right.
stories that just take time, and I don't give a shit if you need this done in a week. I don't care if you need this done in a month. However long it takes to get that photograph, if that means the time, the respect, the humility that this family, these people should be receiving, so be it. I'm not going to
Right.
get a photograph just for the sake of the deadline.
Right. No, absolutely. So let's start to close out and move on to things that are hopefully a little bit more positive and hopeful. So you have a long career photographing things all over the city. Is there one image that you've taken that to you just kind of captures everything about the era that we're living in?
Yeah, there's actually one. I don't want to say the guy's name, but I'm going to tell you the story behind this image. So it was in 2023. I was doing, I think this was August. It was one of the hottest days in Chicago. Obviously, Chicago can get really hot in the summer. There's not a lot of trees in certain areas. I was right near Grant Park. I was walking, had my headphones in, kind of just do my own thing. And I see this guy, and he's laying on a bench sideways, with a bloated belly. And he asked something at first, and of course, and I let my prejudices speak. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't have any money. And I took one of my noise canceling earphones at the time out, and he was like, and he was trying to vocalize something. I really couldn't hear him. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't understand. He needed water. And I was like, you know, hey man, do you want me to go get you a bottle of water? Do you want me to, because there was a local CVS or Walgreens right around the corner. He's like, no, I need help going across the street. And this was right near IDB Wells in Michigan.
Right.
And he latches onto my arm. I'm like, man, I got you. And we took a very slow walk across the road. It took this walk, just to put in perspective, this walk probably should have took 25 seconds. It took us over 7 minutes. He was so dehydrated, and we got to the water fountain. He starts gushing his whole face with water, starts drinking water. And you could kind of slowly start to see the color coming back into his face. and he was coughing, he was sneezing, he was just he was hurting. Even though he had a bloated belly, he was grossly malnutritioned. And I ended up walking him back to the bench, and I just sat with him for about 30 minutes. And I explained to him, like, I'm an art student, et cetera, et cetera. And I asked him, like, can I take your photograph? And a part of me was like, there's this whole theory that you don't photograph people who are houseless. Rightfully so. But also on the other end of the spectrum, if you don't photograph them, you don't acknowledge their existence. So there is a way to do it, I think, that is humane, that is validated. And I think it's really problematic when you don't ask permission. But we obviously had a report, because at this point 30 to 45 minutes pass. And this, I don't know if you remember, but there used to be a McDonald's on Adams and Wabash. It's no longer there. And I asked him, and I asked him, I'm like, do you want any dinner? He's like, are you sure? And we were a 15-minute walk from there. And I was like, just save your strength. I'll be right back. I got him some chicken nuggets, got him some sweet and sour sauce, got him a large Sprite. I still remember the order. And I walked back. So it was like a half an hour between me coming back, and we live in a world where I could have just left. I could have just been like, I did my good deed of the day. I came back, I sat with him, and we just talked some more. And he told me, and again, I don't want to disclose his name, but he was like, if you didn't help me, I probably would have died. And I have a photo where he's on the bench laying, and we're just going like this, where we're just giving each other pounds of respect. He didn't necessarily know my whole life story. I didn't know his whole life story. And to be frank, at that time, it didn't matter. It was just two men sitting with each other, taking care of each other. And that is one of those, there's two photographs from that. There's the one where we give each other the pound, and there's one where he's splashing water on his face. In that photograph, I walked away, immediately called my wife, and I was in tears. And I just said, I know what I pretty much implied I know what I'm going to do with my life. And he even said, he's like, a lot of times people always speak for us. They never ask us anything. It's always, especially politicians, I think are the biggest ones to contribute to this, of like, they would speak for the community, never ask, what can I do to help? And granted, could I have done more as a college student? Probably. But I always told him, hey man, if we ever see each other again, please don't hesitate to like knock me on, like tap me on the shoulder if I have my headphones on or something, and vice versa. Unfortunately, I've never seen him since. I hope he's okay. But that is one of those photographs that it may not have been compositionally perfect by any means, but I think it's the most significant photograph I've probably ever taken.
I love that. That's honestly a very beautiful and touching story, to be quite frank with you.
Thanks. And I will just say that, like, I think that to be a good photographer, you don't have to, if you're an aspiring photographer, you don't have to spend hours, thousands of dollars pressing the camera. I know a lot of people would say, just pick up a camera. Any camera's in your pocket's the best. Start slow and just take your time getting to know people. If you get to know people, you become an instantly better photographer.
Absolutely. So after witnessing so much resistance, exhaustion, and also sometimes even hope through your lens, what still makes you believe in the power of showing up and documenting?
Well, I think especially with this administration, where they just can say Willy Wonka is a real person, photographs help. You know what I mean? We are literally in a world where if one person refutes a fact, then evidently for the whole right side, it's like, it's truth. I think that personally for me, I hope my photographs are used in classrooms. I hope my photographs are used. I don't really give a shit if my work is made created to make thousands of dollars. I think it's much more important to create work that makes a lasting impression. So my niece, who's 6 years old, has a better life. If people can learn, and people can also ask questions about my work of like, why am I seeing this when I hear this? And that's, and another thing of like, there's 3 photographs I took at Broadview specifically, and I forget the timestamps. There was 45 seconds in between them where there are, we see body language through photography, through anything. We see
Right.
people as a threat. If you're like this, you see people submissive if, their arms are just, on the side. We speak so much language through just visual cues.
Right.
And there was 3 photographs where I took in front of ICE. ICE is a facility before they put up the gate. This is, I would say, a month and a half back by now, where you just have protesters with a sign, and you have these guys, which are ICE SRT, which is a special response team, and they are, kitted out as if they're going to raid a compound, when you have people on the other end being like, wearing t-shirts, jeans. And at that point, no one really had gas masks yet. Like, a lot of people were just wearing KN95s. And then in the second image, you have the people standing there and a white puff of smoke right at their face. And then you can see their shadows from behind the gate of the ICE facility, meaning that there were people shooting at the right-hand corner of the building down at innocent protesters. And then the third image is you have the gate closed and the people fleeing. So I think that the photograph is very important to challenge lies, especially from the press secretary. Right. But on the other end of the spectrum, it's our responsibility as photographers to not weaponize that, because you can weaponize it to crop it in to make it look way worse than it is. So there needs to be some sort of, I don't know what Meta could personally do, from a big conglomerate, but there needs to be some way to kind of fact check because I've had photographs say it's been AI altered when all I've done was just like do shadows with a curve or highlights. I'm like, homie, I haven't done anything. What are you talking about? There needs to be some sort of way that, you can be informed this photograph has not been altered. Yes, maybe the highlights, the shadows, but the image as its contextual idea has not been altered.
Right.
So,
well, it's nice that you can still be a little bit hopeful. You, like I said, you've been on the ground for so long at Broadview specifically, and also in all of the local Chicago protests that have been going on for months and months and months at this point. It's nice to hear that somebody who is witnessing all this pain and frustration and all the other big emotions that are being felt by so many people is still able to keep a positive outlook on, one, what you're contributing, but two, what the future of this could possibly be.
Yeah. And, Chicago as like immediate, like as a metropolitan area, a lot of people like Chirac and, using these certain slurs to identify our city. And this is not necessarily a Chicago thing, could be LA, New York. If you're a dick to someone, they're going to be a dick right back. If you're respectful, there's going to be no issues. I mean, I've had encounters where gang members have asked me, what am I doing documenting in this area? And I told them, I'm a social justice photographer. I show them my Instagram. Everything's fine. It's the issue of like, people are always so prepared to be just aggressive, defensive and but you would get, I'm telling you right now, this is not even just a photography thing. This is just a job, a human being thing. You will get so far in life with just treating people with respect, treat people the way you want to be. It's not rocket science, but unfortunately we live in a world where evidently, terms like woke is a way to weaponize it. I mean, Trump has been, and I will give him credit here, he's been a mastermind of taking words that we have learned since we were kindergartners and instill in our children, and then being like, homie, that's not good. So instead of saying empathy, he says woke. And I mean, there's a plethora of, things that he says, but Chicago, just in general, I mean, I'm walking around with well over $3,000 to $5,000 on me at all times. And I've never I mean, jinx, knock on wood, watch me say this all the time. Paige, I was robbed. But
You're literally gonna be like, can you edit that part out because it just happened?
But you know, it's one of those things that like, just be smart. Don't be a dumbass.
Right.
Like if you're in a new neighborhood you don't know, don't walk around with your headphones on. Use common sense. But for the most part, if you look out for the neighborhood will look out for you. And if you have good intentions, the neighborhood understands that.
Right. Absolutely. Well, that is all that I have for you. Do you have anything else that you feel like I might have missed?
I will say I appreciate you checking my workout and, you know, contacting me, and this has been wonderful. I can't speak highly enough about this. I'm not just saying this to your own horn. I genuinely mean this.
I appreciate it.
But I highly recommend people who are going to be viewing this to try to do your research, find out who is taking the photograph that you're viewing. I think it's really, and I try to be very transparent about like who I am as a person so that I'm not just fetishizing over a moment that's happening. So like if you look at my Instagram and you scroll back, you'll still see social justice photography, like all the way back.
Right.
This is not something that, and it's unfortunate that, you know, just because there's a national spotlight on Chicago that my work is being seen for reasons that are no fault of my own, no fault to others. It's just, you know, this is the moment we're in. But I highly suggest people try to do their best and Google some photojournalists, specifically who are in their area, as well as people abroad, especially in heightened censorship. I think it's really important that you try not to live in your own bubble. And I'm still trying to work on that myself. But
Right.
But that's what I'll say.
Good. That's on my to-do list actually, because right now you might be the only photojournalist that I'm following on my podcast Instagram account. So I need to expand.
I can hook you up with some more.
Oh, great. Perfect. Love it. All right. Well, I will have your website, your social media linked in the show notes of this episode so everybody can go check that out, give you a follow. I need to find a piece of one of your pieces and I need to add to cart and then create a gallery wall around it. That's also on my list of things to do.
Holding you to that.
I'm serious. Like I have like analysis paralysis when I buy art where I'm like, oh, like, is this one the best one? Like, especially when I live in my mom's house now, but when I lived on my own, like I would start with one big piece and then build the rest of like the gallery wall around it. So now I'm like yours is going to be my big piece.
Yeah.
So I gotta select it carefully because the rest of the wall is going to be built around it.
And I will say for the people who are watching this, who are like, you know, like, hey, getting tear gas might be a little bit too much. I completely understand. Someone made these, and
yes.
I unfortunately I don't know their name, but they have like the National Lawyers Guild number and the Immigration Coalition refugee I forget, it's ICIR, but I have them like on my wrist now, which are awesome because my memory sucks.
That's a great idea. The Taylor Swift friendship bracelets, but for useful things.
Exactly. So like there are so many ways that people can help out. Try to, if you don't have a rapid response team in your vicinity, create one before. You don't want to create one in panic. Create one, whether you're in Memphis, whether you're in Austin, whether you're in Florida, where you may not need it, and hopefully you don't. But it's it's better to be prepared, you know, rather than later. The other thing I would say is, if you can, please consider donating to the National Lawyers Guild. They are an amazing organization. They're in all 50 states, and they are pretty much the people you see with like green caps, green helmets, and they pretty much are legal observers, making sure that people are held accountable so that we don't get abused, as well as protesters, as well as the police themselves. It's for everyone. So that's where I'll end.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to Adriano speak as much as I did. I said it so many times at the top, he is just so well spoken and so needed in this moment that we are experiencing in general, but also in Chicago. If you've been paying attention to the news, it's been just really insane down here, and we need people like Adriano to tell the stories of people that often don't get their stories told. One thing I wanted to touch on before heading out is that as of January 1st, I will be launching a Substack, which is very fun and exciting and also a little bit vulnerable. But the Substack is going to be called She Knows the Score. If you would like to subscribe, you can find me on Substack at She Knows the Score. And I will be using this as a kind of way to post monthly kind of newsletter kind of things. I toyed a lot with different ideas as to how to get some writing out there and ultimately landed on Substack. It is quite oversaturated, but I figure that people that are interested in what I have to say will go to there. But that first newsletter will be launching on January 1st of 2026, if you would like to get into it and get reading. And I will have the Substack linked in the show notes so everybody can go there. And yeah, I hope everybody has a fantastic new year. And we're getting close to year 2 of Current Affairs Unfiltered, which is very, very exciting. And that's part of what the Substack is for, is kind of expanding what Current Affairs Unfiltered is and what I do and the people that I reach. So very exciting things coming, and congratulations, guys. We are almost to the 1-year mark of Donald Trump's second term. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who could use this information. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Or now you can subscribe to me on Substack at She Knows the Score. Remember to keep asking questions, stay engaged, and to keep documenting. I will see you guys in the new year.